All right, so kabocha, or Japanese pumpkin, is prized for its nutty, earthy flavor, and it's a little less sweet than a regular pumpkin. It has a dense, creamy texture when cooked, and it makes it ideal for soups, stews, and of course, curry. If you're new to kabocha, here's what you need to know. Pick a squash that feels heavy with firm, dull skin. It has a deep green color, but it also might be slightly orange, and that means it's ripe. And here's a bonus. You don't even need to peel it. The skin softens during cooking and is totally edible. So that's one less thing to worry about. But you don't have to eat the skin if you don't want to. We'll be roasting the squash today because roasting caramelizes the natural sugars, giving it a deep, rich flavor. Here's the plan. I'll first show you how to safely cut the kabocha, then we'll roast it because roasting gives it flavor, and finally, we're gonna make that easy, mouth-watering curry. Kabocha squash can be tricky to cut because the skin is thick and tough, and here's how to handle it safely. Start by cutting off the stem for stability, and then slicing it in half and scooping out the seeds. A heavy knife is key because it does most of the work for you. Make sure it's sharp, and it gives you better control and it reduces the risk of slipping, okay? Let's give it a shot right now. Whew. Okay. There we go. And, yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Ta-da! And just scoop it out.
If you want to avoid cutting it, you can roast it whole at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 50 to 60 minutes. But don't forget to poke holes in the skin to release steam. Or you could partially roast it for 20 minutes and then cut it if you don't want to chance it. You can also pressure cook it in the Instapot for 10 to 15 minutes and then cut it and then roast it. I mean, there are so many ways to avoid having to cut through this raw if you don't want to. But once it's prepped, you're ready to roast the pieces. Drizzle the cut squash with a bit of oil and massage it in on both sides and sprinkle it with salt if you want to. Place the cut side down on a baking sheet with or without parchment paper and roast that at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 to 45 minutes depending on how big the kabocha is, or at least until the skin and flesh is fork tender. While the kabocha roasts, let's prep the other vegetables. Let's start by chopping up one medium yellow onion. Perfection isn't the goal here, just a rough chop to get it into small pieces for sautéing them. I'm going to save you some time and show you all the vegetable prep at once. Chop up 1 to 2 carrots or a handful of baby carrots. You don't want to use too many because carrots are really sweet and you don't want it to overpower the squash. I use 3 cloves of garlic. You can always put more, but that's a personal thing. I'm making curry, not fighting off a vampire horde. And I'm adding a shallot, which is onion's younger, cooler cousin, but that's optional. Okay, now that the kabocha squash is done, take it out and test it with a fork. I got a little carried away poking it, but it is fork tender. I'm flipping them over so that they can cool down, and to be honest, I should have probably let this cool down much more before starting to scoop this out, because it is still pretty hot. But it is easier with bare hands, so don't do what I'm doing. You can always pop these into the fridge for a bit. And again, it's okay if you get some skin, it's totally edible. Preheat your large pot on the stovetop for 1 to 2 minutes and add your oil. Let that warm up for 1 to 2 minutes. Then add your onions and carrots and a pinch of salt into the pot and let them cook, stirring occasionally, about 5 to 6 minutes. Then, if you're using a shallot, make room for the cool cousin by moving the onion and the carrots to the side and sauté the shallot for about a minute and mix it together so it doesn't burn. Shallots are a little more delicate than onions, so they don't need as much time cooking. Then add your minced or chopped garlic and bloom your spices for 30 seconds to release their full flavor. I'm using curry powder and starting with about 1 tablespoon, but I'll be adding more later. If you don't have curry powder, you can always add cumin, tumeric, coriander spice. I'll put more information in the description below. Then add 2 cups of vegetable broth so nothing starts burning and mix it around a bit. I'll add all the roasted kabocha squash and give that a nice mix. And I'm adding a touch more turmeric and cumin to punch up the color and flavor. Now, I like this kabocha to be smooth, but because I don't have an immersion blender, I'm going to scoop up some of the larger chunks of the kabocha squash and blend it in my NutriBullet. You can always use a food processor, but man, I'm starting to wish I had an immersion blender. I have to do this 2 times, but again, this is up to you on how smooth or chunky you want it. Once that's done, I'll add 1 can of coconut milk. I would normally put full fat for maximum flavor, but I'm going to go light this time with the light coconut fat. But you can always use alternative milks if you want to bring the calories down. You can use milk, cashew milk, almond, but there is really something special about using coconut milk. And bring it to a boil and then lower the heat to medium low and let that simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes. Here's where the magic happens. I'm adding a heaping tablespoon of peanut butter. A chef once told me that he uses tahini in his vegetable ramen, and that reminded me of the peanut butter and ramen trend, so I tried it in this curry and it worked perfectly. Peanut butter also helps emulsify the curry, creating a creamy texture without needing extra cream. Plus, the natural oils naturally enhance the richness of the dish while balancing the earthy kabocha flavor. Stir until fully incorporated. Just make sure the peanut butter breaks up and mixes in. And yes, you can also use chunky peanut butter like a psycho. I'm on Team Smooth. Taste and adjust the seasoning as needed. You might want to add a bit more curry powder. I'm adding 1 more tablespoon, another pinch of salt, and a little more peanut butter, maybe about a half a tablespoon more. Let the soup come to a low boil, which means bubbles start to form and pop, and then cut the heat. Give it a minute or two, and then squeeze a little lime juice for that little splash of acid. Serve it hot, garnished with fresh cilantro or parsley, over steamed rice, or with some warm naan or bread on the side. Or sprinkle a little chips or corn nuts for that much needed crunch.
Here's a cool thing about kabocha. It's just not for curry. You can mash it like potatoes, toss it into smoothies for creamy texture, or even slice it thin and bake it into chips. It's versatile, delicious, and low in calories, and perfect for so many dishes. One of the keys to healthy eating is variety. And if you love squash, kabocha is a great way to try something new and different. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.